Hello, everyone, and welcome to Studio Jake. I, of course, am your host, Jacob Airy. Be sure to like this show, hit the subscribe button, and ring that little bell so that way you get notifications, especially for today because I have a very special guest. He is the director of Lola's Love Shack, of In Other Words, and he was also a producer in The Day I Met El Chapo. This is Patrick Vidauri. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Jake.
Now, I want to first ask you about In Other Words. I watched it. I thought it was a great film. It was a lot of fun. It was very charming. And one of the things I really about it is how you crafted the relationships in the film. And one thing that's kind of cool is it involves a couple, and me and my wife were interracial. I'm obviously whiter than white bread, and my wife is Mexican. So that was a lot of fun for me to watch a romantic comedy that had that sort of dynamic. And so I wanted to ask you, how did this story come about? Where did you get the information from, or the inspiration from?
Well, our executive producer, he loved Lola's Love Shack, my first film, and he called me one day and said, "I want to make a feature film with you." And I was like, great. It's what every filmmaker wants to hear, right? So someone loves your movie, they want to finance your next one. So I went down to his house and was pitching him some ideas. And he goes, whoa, whoa, whoa. I don't want to make your film. I want you to make my film. I was like, oh, what is that? And so he tells me the story of a buddy of his who went to France. He sold his company, was traveling through Europe, and he met this Greek girl at a cafe in France. And she only spoke Greek and French, and he only spoke English. But he was smitten, and he went every day to the cafe with a little French English dictionary, and he kind of they're married now, you know. So that was the basis of the story. But he said, let's do this, but let's set it in Mexico. The girl's in Mexico, the guy's American, and that was the parameters. That's it. Other than that, my wife and I came up with the story, and we made him the developer of an app, a dating app. We made him rather than have one of the things in storytelling is, if your protagonist is like a millionaire who just sold his company, is just gallivanting, he's not a very approachable, likable guy, just off the bat. So what you need to make your guy an underdog, and a guy who's, so we made him extremely uncomfortable around women. He's super nervous. He's not rich yet. He's trying to get there. And so he really is this kind of guy that he comes off on the film, played by Brian McClure, very likable, very approachable, lovable guy. And so we're really happy with the casting and really happy with the way the character came out.
Yeah, and like I said, that was you do have some really great talent in there. What was it like with working with actors like Brian McClure and Edie Ganem, and I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly, and Chris Kattan? What was it like working with just that eclectic group of talent?
Well, it's great, and I think for me as a director, the most fun is the acting, is working with the actors and crafting those performances and getting the nuance right. And it was just, each actor brings something different to the table, and they have a different character. Like their own personal character. And so, for instance, Brian McClure was just a consummate professional. He showed up. I had told him, we don't have a lot of money, so I can't do a lot of takes. So you really have to be off book and nail this right away, And he did. There were times he did one take. He was so well prepared, so that when we did rehearsals or we talked about the scene, we were just working on nuance, because he had it very well figured out the way he wanted to play it. And I would tell him, I would just adjust him slightly, and he would take that adjustment, and it was wonderful. Whereas Chris Kattan, who's already a big star, Saturday Night Live, a very, very well-known comedian and improviser, it was more about just, we were so honored that he said yes to our film and having him there. It was more about having him, letting him run free, So there were parts in the script where we had we wrote lines, but we said, okay, he will improvise here. And so we set him up and let him go. And he didn't disappoint. He just riffed and especially when he was making fun of True Andrew's name, he made all that stuff up off the cuff.
Wow.
And and I cut out like 50% of them. He just kept going and gave me a lot of options, and hilarious. And we could hardly contain ourselves. It was hard not to laugh during the take, But it was fantastic. I love working with the actors. Eddie Ganem, I worked with her on Lola's Love Shack. She was the love interest there too. So, and her career has been on the rise. So I'm really happy that we still have this relationship where she agrees to do parts for us. So she's also a great professional and a pleasure to work with.
Now, Lola's Love Shack was more of a coming of age film, sort of a drama, whereas In Other Words is a really great rom-com. And what is it like going from sort of these different genres? I'm always curious about that when I talk to directors, because some have favorite genres, others are just like, hey, I just go in there and work it how I can. But I'm a little curious when it comes to going from one genre to the other. What is that like, and do you have a favorite genre?
Well, I think that that I don't have a favorite genre, but I feel like the comedy genre chose me. I didn't really choose it because I started out, like many filmmakers, making very dramatic, dark films. I did a film about the Stockholm Syndrome and kidnapping. I did a film about a Chicano Vietnam vet who died, like his last day on earth, he dies at the end, So I started out doing kind of more dark matter, like dark material. And at one point, one day I got a call from the guy, a producer, Kevin Messick, who asked me if I would translate his film for Will Ferrell. And I was like, sure. No problem. They wanted, so Will Ferrell did a film in Spanish called Casa de mi Padre, House of My Father. I translated that film and I taught Will Ferrell Spanish. And so it just kind of like these, and so then I got this relationship with the head writer of Saturday Night Live, and I've maintained all these comedic relationships, and I was on a radio show called The Pocho Hour of Power on KPFK, which was a comedy radio show, and I started doing more comedic short films. So I feel like comedy chose me. But as far as directing, you got to have comedic timing. It's difficult. I mean, you definitely have to know what's funny, and you have to be able to improvise. Even on the set, you have to really be open to things happening and not be so locked in to what you think should happen, I think. So I think as a director, I like to keep a very happy kind of ambiance on the set, and that helps for people to be able to riff and create. But no, I don't think that I have a favorite genre. I'm looking forward to doing another drama soon, a dark, actually it's a thriller. And hopefully next year this thriller will get off the ground and I'll get to do something that is dramatic. But I do have, my next film will be a comedy. It's called Debate, and it's going to be shooting before the end of the year. So I'll have 3 comedies under my belt by the end of the year. So I may be pigeonholed. Who knows?
Well, and you never know, because you have Ridley Scott, who does space horror, and then on one hand, and then he does like kind of the sci-fi man alone, like The Martian. So who knows? Maybe we'll see a very diverse filmography on your Wikipedia page. And and one thing too is this is another question I'm always curious about when I talk to directors is. Every director has kind of their own techniques when planning out a film. So like if you talk to one, he's all about the script, and then another, and he's all about the storyboard. And I believe it was Christopher Nolan one time said, "Oh, I never deviate from the script. I see the script and I just work from there. The script is my master key to these films." And so I'm just curious, as far as that technical side of directing. People like me who just enjoy watching movies, we don't hear a whole lot about that. I'm really curious, like how, as far as crafting the story together, how do you go about that?
I think in drama you stick with the script. I like to in comedy you got to leave room for improvisation. But my so far I have not got a Christopher Nolan budget or a Ridley Scott budget.
For sure, yeah,
right. So
right.
at the budget levels that I'm working at, planning is extremely important. And in order to pull off a film, like, in other words, like when I can only do one take or two takes of some shots, you really have to have it planned, very well planned out. So if you're not shot listing, which I mean, you have to shot list, which means every day you know where the camera's going to be, what shots you need to make that scene. And I do like to storyboard the more complex scenes. Storyboarding is very vital to making sure your difficult scenes are imagined ahead of time, so you're not trying to figure it out. Once you start falling behind schedule, it's extremely stressful, and it really kind of ruins your ability to work on nuance, because then you're just trying to survive, right? You're just trying to tread water and finish your day without going over budget. So it's very important to try to keep your pace, like how many shots you can do a day, it's comfortable, so that you could spend your time on those shots, as much time as you need. One of the things that I find extremely helpful is that I've spent about 15 years as an editor in television. And so all that editing has kind of ingrained in my mind what shots I need for a scene. So I could be on set and we're running out of time, and I could say, you know what, don't do the whole dialogue, just do this line. All I'm going to need is this line. There's no, and I wanted to, no, I know what I need, just do this line. And sure enough, when I go to cut it, it works perfectly. You know, sometimes people do every scene from every angle. I mean, all the dialogue from every angle, and then they figure out their scene in post. I like to have that already figured out before I go to shoot.
That makes sense, and that goes down to, like you were saying, for an indie film or an indie project. You have to have those tight schedules, like you were saying. You've got to get it, and you've got to get it down to these 1 or 2 shots. And as far as what's the word I'm looking for? As far as working with, because you work with Christina Nava I believe she worked with you on another film, and what is it like working with her? Because with other words, in other words, it's very well written, and that was one thing I noticed right off the bat while I was watching it. I was like, wow, this is a very good script. It's very tight, and I know, like you said, there was some improv with some of the more comedic parts, but really found it to be well-rounded and well-grounded as well. So what's it like, working with someone like her?
Well, she's not only my collaborator, she's also my wife.
Oh, I did not know that. Okay.
So it's challenging. I mean, what I would say as far as the script is, script is extremely important. Like, if the script isn't good, the movie probably won't be good. And it's extremely important to, so what all the films I've done are written either by me or co-written by me or developed also by me. So I always have a role in developing these stories. And so for this one, Christina and I worked on the story for months and months. We really hammered this thing and trimmed the fat, and then Christina wrote the final script, and we were very pleased with the final script. But yeah, I think that another way to save money on these budgets is that you have to do your tough decisions on the script, not in the edit room. If you spend all this money to gather the actors and the crew and the resources and the locations, and then later on you decide, you know what, that script, that scene isn't working, let's cut it out of the movie, that was a big waste of resources. So the sooner you can figure out that it's not working on the script or on the page, that the story doesn't need this scene, or it'd be better without it, the better for you as a filmmaker, because you could put those resources toward someplace you would need them. But collaborating with somebody is something that I always do. I find, this is a collaborative medium, and I've tried to write scripts on my own. I never do very well. I work very well with others. I wrote my first movie with Esteban Zul. I've written scripts with many other collaborators, and now with Christina, my wife. My wife is a very talented writer. It's one of the things that attracted me to her in the first place, besides the fact that she's beautiful. But working with your wife has its challenges, and we may not always work together, but so far so good. Our next 2 projects are together, and so we'll see how it goes.
My wife is my producer, so obviously we collaborate. Yeah. So we collaborate a lot, obviously. But And that's really something that I think, because my understanding was you actually studied anthropology.
Yeah.
So how do you go from studying anthropology to filmmaking? I'm always intrigued by stories like that.
Well, it's not as big a jump as you would imagine, because anthropology is the study of mankind. You know, and it's the study of difference, of others, right? And you need to really understand when you go and study Native Indians or African or Native cultures throughout the world. You have to leave your own understanding and try to enter theirs and see the world through them. And that's very much what a director needs to do. You know, you need to be able to understand the other and help the actor to understand what's going through the head of these characters that aren't you, you know, and they have different things make them tick. And besides that, I think that it's important. I got a piece of advice when I was young. I think I always wanted to be a filmmaker. I always kind of knew I was going to do this. And so rather than only study film my whole life, since I knew I was going to spend most of my life doing this, I wanted to at least, well, I went to Columbia University in New York. It has an amazing anthropology department. And I got the advice to take things that stimulate your mind and it cause you to, you know, be interested and excited. And so I studied history, I studied anthropology, I studied sculpture, figure modeling and clay. And so, you know, when you go to a meeting and you're pitching to somebody, you got to have a well-rounded character. You got to know books, you got to know history, you have to know politics, you know. And so I think anthropology has definitely helped just to make me a more interesting person. That this kind of arcane knowledge that I know is often fascinating to people. When I was working with Will Ferrell, we would go off on conversations for hours about, like, he asked me once about, he goes, how did Cortez conquer Mexico with such a small army? And I was like, oh my God, you didn't just ask me that. It's like my favorite subject in history. So we talked for 2 hours about that, and I was like, we better get back to work, because, you know, you got to learn your lines. but you know, just being well read and being well rounded is important, and you can't just be a one track person. You know, maybe you can, but I find it helpful to have studied anthropology.
And who are some of your filmmaking influences as far as directing or filmmaking go?
Well, my heroes are Akira Kurosawa, the Japanese filmmaker. Favorite movie is probably Rashomon, but all of his samurai epics are just so human. I mean, he has a humanity to his characters, and what's really important in all his stories are the way people treat each other, and the kindness and the humanity. And even though they're action and exciting, it really comes down to that kind of humanistic point of view, which I think you'll find in other words. This kind of respect for the other, the kind of what's really important is understanding each other. And then just technique-wise, Robert Rodriguez is a huge, you know, influence. And just because his mantra of don't wait, create your own opportunities, you know, you could be a one-man crew. I've learned, because of his influence, I've learned to write, direct, and edit and produce, and I've made a career of it. Like, I didn't just learn them, I've made a career out of them, and bought this house and raised my kids with the skills I learned from making my own films at home. Editing I learned from just making movies, you know. And when I finally needed a job producing and editing, these are skills I had learned because I was at home in my little studio making movies, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And one final question I have for you is what advice would you give to young up and coming film directors who they want to break in, and maybe they're starting out on short films, but they want to do longer form content? What kind of advice do you have for them?
Well, it's a good segue, because it's exactly the advice I took from Robert Rodriguez's book, which is just get up and do it. You know, get up and do it. Don't let anything stop you. And really, the more you do it, the better you'll get. So, you know, your first short film may not be so good. Maybe, so I made about over a dozen short films before I ever made a feature. I mean, I think I haven't even counted. It's something like 18 short films. I also went to UCLA Film School and got my master's there and made a few more shorts there. But when you think you're ready to do a feature, I think you should do it. My first feature, We made it for under $40,000. And that might even sound like a lot to your listeners, but we started with, I think, like $10,000. And then I said, look, we're going to start. And I have always said, once the train starts moving, people want to come on board. As long as you're talking about it, people are, yeah, it's a bunch of talk. But when you say, we are doing this, we've already started casting, we're shooting on this date. And then what I did is I set up an LLC and I sold shares. So I got investors and I got people to, who knew that this is what I wanted to do with my life, friends, family, and others. Contributed, and I got $1,000 here, 2,000, 5,000, and we raised enough to make our first feature, Lola's Love Shack, and that's the one that proved the fact that I could make a feature. And that's another thing, that nobody believes you could make a feature unless you make a feature. So yeah, it doesn't matter how good your short is, you'll always kind of be thought of as a shorts director. I think if you get into Sundance with your shorts, or if you do something really big, then yes, maybe you could make the jump to features. But barring that, you really need a feature to be considered a feature director. So, I would say do it by hook or crook.
That's really great advice. And I just realized I'm wearing the same shirt I wore a few weeks ago on another podcast I did. I just want to assure my viewers that I did wash it since then. I just realized that as I'm looking at myself in the view screen. But before we close out, where can people find you, and where can they watch your works?
I am at Pat Perez World on Instagram. I'm on Twitter at Pocho Patrick. Facebook, Patrick Perez Vidauri. But you can see my latest film is on Amazon Prime. There is an issue with Amazon Prime. I got to tell your viewers, and we're trying to. They don't have the subtitles on it. Did you watch it? Did you watch it on Amazon Prime?
In other words?
Yeah.
No, I watched it through a screener.
Okay, cool. Well, it's all over the place. It's on Redbox, Vudu, iTunes, Fandango. All of them have the subtitles correct except Amazon. That's the only one who has, and that's the one most people watch it on. So we're gonna finish. It's gonna be fixed by next week. By the week, what's next week? What's the date wise? So
that would be let me look at my calendar. The 27th.
Yeah, the week of the 27th of September. It should be fixed. But like I said, it's available on iTunes, Fandango, everywhere else. It's also on demand on your cable box or your satellite dish. So just go wherever you rent movies, and you'll be able to see it there. So please check it out. I mean, a lot of people are saying it's a great movie for these times, because it's really about love and acceptance, and it's a fun kind of escape from these troubled times we're in. And so you can see it there. Starting February, it's going to be on HBO Latino, starting in February.
Oh, that's fantastic.
21. HBO has purchased it, and we're extremely excited. So that's where you can find it starting February 2021.
And of course, you can go to my website, StudioJakeMedia.com, where I wrote a very glowing review of In Other Words, because like I said, I just thought it was a fantastic film. And also, you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Parler. It's all the same, at Real Jacob Berry. You can find me on Facebook, Author Jacob Berry. I've already plugged my website. Once again, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and also leave a comment. Let us know what you think about In Other Words, and Lola's Love Shack, and any other of these features. So once again, Patrick, thank you so much for coming on. I believe this was a really fantastic conversation.